Hello and welcome to Trojans Live. A pair of legends join me now, Sean Cody and John Jackson on Trojans Live here. Just a little roundtable talk, boys. I really want to dig into some of the big defensive topics around this team as we look at spring football and then obviously on into the fall season. But when you look back at last year, obviously some major changes, the new defensive coordinator, chief among them in Todd Orlando. Where did you guys think was the biggest improvement that USC made defensively last year? JJ, let's just start.
Well, defensively, I think we have to start with Sean. There's no way I can answer a defensive question first. Go ahead, Sean. What do you think?
Well, thank you, JJ. I appreciate the layup for the defensive player. Yeah, Jordan. To me, it was creating turnovers. I thought last year better than years before under Todd Orlando. They did a good job of creating turnovers, and that started with Talanoa Hufanga, his instinctual play, being around the ball. Interceptions were 9 interceptions in a 6-game period is a pretty strong number for a season. So I look for that to increase under Dante Williams. I think he did a good job there. But like Coach Soota said, there's some things to work on. With third down efficiency was down there this year, and red zone defense was poor. So there's things to work on. But I also saw progress last year in a short game, so short 6-game span.
And Jordan, the best defense that I'm going to say is score points. That's the best defense you can have.
Well, it's an interesting point, JJ, because this offense and offenses like it traditionally are tough to play defenses with, right? I mean, you see this all the time. We saw it last year with the Seahawks in the league where they started the season. They said, oh, let Russ cook. Well, Russ was cooking, but they couldn't get any stops. And so Pete Carroll said, no, let's run the football again because it helps my defense. And so that is a difficult balance. It is a tough task for Todd Orlando. It was at Texas for Todd Orlando because Tom Herman was the same kind of thing. It was like, hey, let's see if we can score 50. But if the other team scores 45, you're still in a close game. And it is a tough task to be the defensive coordinator, isn't it, JJ, when you're playing offense the way USC is trying to?
Yeah, exactly. And this goes back even to last week, Jordan, when you talked about the biggest thing for me, what I wanted to see out of this football team is what kind of identity are they going to have? Is this going to be a defensive-minded team that's going to, score 24 points and then bleed the clock? Or is it going to be a team that has to score 42 points to win because the defense can't stop anybody? So I think team identity is on the top of my list on what to accomplish this spring.
Sean sort of already answered this question, but so I'll ask it to you, JJ. But obviously the 3 big losses are Marlon Tuipulotu, Elijah Griffin, and Talanoa Hufanga. Do you agree with him that Talanoa is the toughest guy to replace on this defense?
No, I do, just because he was such a playmaker. I mean, how many big plays did he make? How many key interceptions? He was always in the right place at the right time. It just seemed like he knew what the other team was going to do before they even ran it. He was just amazing in the secondary in the way he played back there, the way he was able to create turnovers for this team and really establish an identity for them last year.
And Sean, I don't think they have an obvious replacement for him. I mean, Isaiah Pola-Mao listed 2 names, Chase Williams, who we've seen play a lot of football, but is not the biggest guy if you're going to really talk about a pure strong safety. And then there's the Texas transfer who, I haven't really laid eyes on. So maybe he is the solution, but it does appear to be a pretty open competition next to Pola-Mao, and maybe changes the way they play defense. Cause I thought last year they really used Hufanga the way that Pete Carroll used Pola-Mao. I mean, they featured him in their defense. They created blitzes for him. They put him around the football because they knew he was their playmaker, and they don't necessarily have the obvious guy to fill that role. So they may have to change the way they do things defensively.
Yeah, just a special skill set for a player. It's hard to, imagine bringing a strong safety into the box. And basically he played a middle linebacker for a game last year.
Yeah.
Put him in that box situation and everyone's like, whoa, what are they doing? But he had that kind of skill set. Yeah, you mentioned Xavier Alford, I think, has a chance to maybe make some noise. Chase Williams, these guys, have a chance. Greg Johnson, I think, you could throw a name in there who's a physical kind of, up in the box.
Got to get healthy when I was an injury last year, but yeah.
Yes. So, I mean, I think there's some interesting names. I look at linebacker too as a critical position. You lose a guy like EA in the portal, and you got Raylan Goforth and Kanai Mawai, going in there. But just some depth concerns there. I look to a guy maybe like a Rajon Davis who's coming in fall to maybe he can spark something there at linebackers because they're going to need some more depth at that position.
Well, that's a good one for you then, JJ, because you see so many of these players and have known them for a lot longer than Sean and I have. Rajon Davis, coming through that modern day pipeline. What are reasonable expectations for him? What kind of player is he as he arrives on campus?
Well, he gives him a lot of versatility because he's a sideline to sideline type of player that can cover a lot of ground. And all these Pac-12 schools, as you know, Jordan, are trying to spread everybody out and hit the seams and stuff. And so because Rajon Davis is so athletic, he goes sideline to sideline and is almost like having an extra strong safety and a very fast linebacker because he is physical at the point of attack.
And then Sean, the other big freshman, and obviously is the guy we led the show with. And I don't think there's maybe a better person to ask this question to, because more or less you were Corey Foreman. I mean, you were the guy that Pete brought in as the defensive lineman that everyone wanted. And it was a big deal that you came to USC. What are reasonable expectations, though, for Corey Foreman? Because, you didn't come in and have 15 sacks as a freshman either, as good as you were. What are reasonable expectations for him in his first season?
Well, you got to find a way to get on the field. I remember being a freshman, you got to find a position that you're comfortable at. I started out at defensive end, and I eventually ended up moving to the three technique or inside the defensive tackle because there was
Which was funny listening to him talk about it, Sean. He basically said that. He said, right, I want to show up looking like a defensive end, not a defensive tackle. I mean, because that is sort of, always that flex position where you look at a guy and you go, well, hey, he can carry the weight. He could maybe be an elite defensive tackle. So you sort of have to figure that out, right?
Yeah, you heard, Vic Soto's, mentioned it joking, I mean, when you got a guy like that at that size who can move like that, if you could put more weight on him and get him bigger, I know it's not something maybe he wants to hear, but and he can, still have that same quickness inside. I watched his film, his highlights. A lot of the stuff is happening inside. He's making quick moves inside, beating guys who aren't fast enough to pick up that kind of stuff inside. So you might see that in the end, especially when you have a Drake Jackson outside who's kind of leaned up already. Now he might go after that and kind of lean up in that sort of body, or he could go the other way and be a bigger guy. So we'll see. You just got to watch how the development happens in his career.
Well, one thing that we're watching that I know we are all enjoying, because it's something we've talked about for years, and JJ, a lot of this too, because your son is on the team, but it seems like in the strength conditioning, size is up, and on the practice field, physicality is up. We're seeing him do, Alabama drill, physical tackling drills right away when the pads went on. I got to imagine, JJ, you see that as a positive sign for this program as they do try to create that mentality.
Yeah, no question about it. And also, in talking to my son, that's exactly the thing he emphasizes. He says, Dad, we're much more physical. It's the emphasis is in the weight room, in the strength and conditioning program. He thinks it's just going to be a completely different team as far as physicality goes, which is always a good sign. And he'll have to get involved in the run game as well, blocking, which is, not what receivers want to do. I didn't want to do it, but he has to do it. And so that's a good thing when you hear that, the receivers are making blocks down the field as well. And it just adds to the physicality of the team and the image that this team portrays, I mean, Amon-Ra is the same type of player, right?
Last year, they talked that talk. The coaches came in. They really wanted to do it. They didn't have time to do it because of COVID and everything. They basically couldn't implement any of this stuff. They didn't have spring football last year. They barely had a camp. So they're trying to do that this year.